Thank you very much for listening to this week's talk on the Cedra of Bo, which we are dedicating to the speedy release and the safe release of all of the hostages captive in Gaza, and the safety and security and success of all of the soldiers who are fighting so bravely on many different fronts in the land of Israel, protecting Yisrael all over the world. May Hashem be with us and help us in every single way and protect us. And when we think about the words of this Sedra of Bo and the previous Sedra of Va'era, and the recurring theme was, let my people go, Shalach Ami Abduni. And we should think about the onus to let the people go. That is the onus on the evil captors. That is the onus on people around the world who could be pressurizing, who could be ensuring that this result of humanity is achieved, and their failure to do so, whether they are international bodies or whether they are individual countries who could be pressurizing the evil captors to behave like human beings. We put the onus on them. Let my people go. And please God, may these words be heard, and may Hashem ensure that this result is achieved. And as we look at the words of the words and the events of the Cedras, we can also see in this week's Cedra, as we read about the last three plagues, Arbe, Choshech, and Makas Bechoros, the plague of locusts, darkness, and the smiting of the firstborn. We can see Hashem's involvement in human affairs as we've gone through all the layers of creation and the parallel between the 10 utterances of creation and the 10 plagues, how really each plague somehow fits in with an aspect of the creation of the world. There's pieces of a jigsaw that are combining, that are linking. And before we actually think about it in these terms, we can also see that Paro is really giving us an example, a tutorial, Teshuvah tutorial part 2. We had Teshuvah tutorial part 1 when we saw the events that happened towards the end of the book of Bereshit with Yosef and his brothers, how they initially treated him very, very inappropriately and badly. And this is a question that haunts us, how they could have done such things to their brother. And yet, in the fullness of time, when they went through the various chapters in the account, we see how they effected a true teshuvah, and we see that many commentators actually understand Yosef's actions as a way of making sure that they would be able to perform complete teshuvah as in the at the end stages, when they were in a similar situation, when they had an opportunity to perhaps not look after one of the so-called favorite children of Yaakov, whether they would just abandon him or whether they would really try to save him. And we see that they took on board what happened to them. They realized why they were in this situation, and they were trying with all of their might to make sure that Binyamin was not going to be left behind, even at risking their own lives. And so that is the perfect teshuvah. What we have in this week's Sedra with Paro is what we can understand as the desecration of remorse. Because at the end of last week's Sedra, with the plague of Borod, the plague of hailstones, Paro acknowledges that Hashem is the righteous one, and he and his people are sinners. And at that point, he could have continued along that path. He could have chosen a path of following through, acknowledging and accepting that Hashem is in command, and he will follow Hashem's instructions, and this will be his chance to carry out teshuvah. But when he turns his back on that, when he, as it were, desecrates his earlier remorse, then he loses that chance. And this is something that we need to bear in mind, that as we make choices in our lives, that we have the potential to to go to follow a path of coming closer to Hashem. That's the real meaning of the word teshuvah, is return. And when we follow that path, when we acknowledge, when we put that ego, our ego to the side, and we say, Hashem, I want to serve you. I am in this world to do good, to help, to establish a connection and commitment with the creator of the world, and incorporate that into my life, into all aspects of my life. We have a choice. But if we don't choose the correct way, if we don't take it on board and act in accordance with our remorse, with our acknowledgement, then we are following in that path of Paro, and we are then going to lose that gift, because teshuvah is a gift. And the last three plagues of Arbe, Choshech, and Machas Bachoras, in their own unique way, show Hashem's involvement in human affairs. And there's been an escalation from the way Hashem creates the world originally, and how he is involved in that ongoing creation. But when we can look at the plague. We'll start with Arbe, with locusts. So there is a pasuk in Mishlei, and that is pasuk chapter 30, verse 27. And it says, Melech ein lo arbe, v'yetzeit k'chotzeit kulon. That means, focusing on the first half of that verse in Proverbs, Mishlei, that the Arbe do not have a king. They rise up as a swarm, and we need to have a contrast. The vehicle of the punishment for Paro and the Egyptians, once they are not going to honor their remorse, once they're not going to follow through their remorse, is a creature that does not have a king. And so as you look at that phenomenon of the plague of Arbe, and also the phenomenon of the fact that the Arbe, the locusts, destroyed everything that was left, that remained after the plague of Borod. And I think that also echoes the idea that there was a chance after Borod, that there was something to salvage, the various items that had been brought inside, and so they were going to be protected, and but those things were going to be destroyed. That chance of teshuvah, when Paro chose to head down the wrong path, to head back into his ego, then he lost that, and the remaining physical objects and people that were spared during the plague of Borod were destroyed in the plague of Arbe. And with the plague of Choshech, with the plague of darkness, it's not a question of people being struck with a plague of blindness. They didn't become physically blind. And this is an illustration, again, of failure to choose, failure to honor remorse, failure to sanctify remorse and follow it through, because there are none so blind as those who don't want to see. Their eyes were working fine, but it was their choice to be blind to the reality of Hashem, to shut out the light of Hashem. That choice meant that they were struck with a plague, a plague of abnormal darkness that was a palpable darkness. It wasn't an absence of light. It was something physical that made them incapable of movement. And again, they were frozen, as it were, in this darkness, and they were no longer able to effect choice, not because freedom of choice is not a genuine and real phenomenon, but because they chose badly and they lost the opportunity. And we don't always have opportunities on loop. We need to avail ourselves of opportunities, and especially the opportunity of coming back to Hashem, and not to take it for granted, and to think that we can continue certain actions that we shouldn't be doing on repeat, and then we'll always have another chance and another chance and another chance. And this plague of darkness is showing us that last chance sometimes does actually come, and then there isn't a last chance after that. And really the crescendo as we come to Makas Bechoros, that with the striking of the firstborn and the language that's used in the Torah, from the firstborn of Paro to the firstborn of the person lowest on the social ladder, on the rung of society, that this was the great equalizer, and a message to the emblem, to the paradigm of ego. And that is what Paro represented, that his ego was so vast that there was not room to acknowledge Hashem. But each and every one of us, we may not be Paro, but we have our struggles with our ego, and we have to understand that we need to accept that Hashem is in charge, and we need to look to Hashem and perfect our ways with Hashem. And in so doing, we are going to avoid the trap that Paro fell into, and that he dragged all his people down with him. And even though they realized that this was happening, and after the plague of Borod, they lose their subservience and they scream at him, "Don't you know that Egypt's lost?" And they're begging him to stop, but still they have not availed themselves of this opportunity of teshuvah, and together with Paro, they are going to be destroyed in the sequence of all of the 10 plagues, and stand as an eternal lesson to all of us about how teshuvah is going to, on some occasions, be taken away if we don't utilize the chance that we have to do it. And please God, all of our prayers should be answered, and we look forward to a world where everybody acknowledges the greatness, the oneness of the Creator, and the way and the values of humanity that the Torah stands by. And that, please God, we should see a world where the horrific events that we have witnessed in the last few months are not going to happen again, and we move forward to a world where people can unite in the service, the true service of Hashem Yisbarach. Wishing everybody a very good Shabbos.